Okay, so we're being recorded. Um, so anyways, I would like to welcome everybody today for our webinar with our School of Advanced Studies alumni, Dr. Jeanette Landin. And Dr. Jeanette Landin is going to be speaking to us today about her experiences as an alumni with University of Phoenix and how it's impacted her career uh, and other things in her professional life as well as her community life. So I'm going to turn this over right now to Dr. Landin and say thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to hearing you speak. So welcome, Dr. Landin.
Thank you for having me, and welcome everybody. I'm not sure where everybody is, but I'm going to give you a welcome from not so sunny southern Vermont. Right now it is about 48 degrees where I am, but it's lovely up here. And so as I was reflecting on this talk, the first thing that really occurred to me is I got my doctorate in 2011, but the real journey didn't start until March 13, 2013. And that was the day that my uh, employer fired me because they figured out that I didn't want to keep working at a place where I wasn't going to get any acknowledgement for being a doctor. And up to that point, I was like, kind of thinking, okay, I can take my doctorate, and I was teaching, and I love teaching. That's my absolute passion. And I thought, okay, well, I can make this place better. I can, do whatever. And I also had some other side projects going on little by little. And then one day they figured out that I wasn't going to stay there anymore. And that kind of kicked everything into high gear. But what I want to share a lot is that what I found after getting the doctorate is that it was almost more challenging with the doctorate than to get the doctorate. And that's going to sound hopefully not too demotivating, but it's it's opened a lot of doors, but behind every single door has been a whole new set of opportunities and challenges that I would have never ever guessed would have existed. And one that actually slightly preceded me earning my doctorate was I had the chance to author a textbook, and it's one that is still in current publication. The only reason they even allowed my co-author and I to do this was that we were both on track to finishing our doctorate prior to the initial publication, or else they would have never allowed that. And it's a book on payroll accounting, which is put out by McGraw-Hill, and we're very pleased that it is right now number 2 in the industry. We're trying for number 1, but that's okay. And I actually co-author it with another SAS alumni, Dr. Paulette Shermer. And we have a lot of fun. We actually met at our very, very first doctoral residency, which was in San Francisco, California. And we just happened to notice that we both liked accounting and needed to plug our computers in, and the rest, as they say, is history. But after being fired for wanting to improve my life, uh, it really occurred to me that I had to get out there and figure out what it was I really, really wanted to do and where did I want to do this. And I'm not going to lie, it took a bit of effort and a lot of determination to find a job that fit exactly what I wanted. Um, my doctorate, just to give you a little bit of my background here, I had done a bachelor's in social ecology with a concentration on criminology. All right, well, that doesn't get you very far. I got into a job that I kind of liked, but mostly didn't, and got out of the industry. Then one day I woke up and said, I think I want to go do something with business, and called up my University of Phoenix rep, and I said, hey, what can I do that's business related? Let's do another bachelor's. And he said, nah, you're going to do a master's. Okay, let's find out. So I did the master's in business, and that was pretty cool too. It's what allowed me to become a teacher. and I teach only at the college level. I've tried teaching lower levels, and they're just not for me. I like working with my adults. And then one day, after I figured out that I really wanted to be a teacher, then I said, I want to be the best possible teacher. And so I called University of Phoenix back, and I said, okay, what am I going to do with this? And they said, you're going to do a doctorate in education if you want to be a teacher. I said, okay, sounds good. And then, just along the way, I mean, I met people like Dr. Burley, who is one of the people who is hosting this webinar, and I adore her. She was on my learning team, along with a couple of other dear friends, and we still keep in touch. Your learning team will help you a lot, by the way. But in figuring out all of these things of what I wanted to do, what I knew I wanted to do the most was work with people who had significant challenges, since that was kind of the focus of where my doctoral dissertation went. I tease about it because I was originally going for kind of a broad topic of inclusion, which, if you're in education, that's a huge broad topic. And I narrowed it down, and finally got to where I said, okay, what do people who have used drugs need to do to be successful? So, as I teasingly, when I talk about this, I got to work with all the illegal drug users. That was a lot of fun, actually. But finding out what they considered success. And I also developed a real passion in helping people figure out what was success. And so, okay, here I am, no job, having been on, I forget how many interviews at that point in time. I think I had been on 10 on ground interviews and unknown amounts of phone interviews by this point in time. But now, things had to happen quickly because part of my doctoral journey is when I started, my kids were 3 and 5 years old. And, here, fast forward, let's see, so this was 2013. My kids were somewhere around 7 and 9 without doing the actual math on it. And we had to find something to really work for all of us. And so one night, after having had what had to have been the worst interview ever, in that I could have gotten the job, but I hated the place. It was in the middle of the oil fields in Central California. And if you are from California and you know Bakersfield, go west and you'll know where I'm talking about. Anyway, I got home and I said, okay, I've got to find a job. This is not working. And I took a look, and here's this little school in Putney, Vermont, which I'd never heard of. And I figured it was one of those two states that they kind of make a rectangle together, but I didn't know which one it was. And they were looking for someone who could work with students with learning issues. And I was thinking, okay, well, there's a lot of learning issues. And I pulled up the website, and here they're talking about students who have autism spectrum or ADHD or dyslexia and a whole bunch of other things layering behind it. And I'm listening to their students speak, and I remember the hair just standing up on my neck, and I handed my husband my headsets, and I said, you got to listen to this. And he looks at me and he goes, no, you got to get this job. Just make it so. All right. And long story short, it was actually the fastest hire I've ever had in academia. They hired me within about 3 weeks. And I was moved within about a month and a half, sight unseen, except for me coming out and spending one day in Vermont. And I'm a California girl. I grew up in Southern California. I've lived all over the country, but when I moved to Vermont, I was coming from Northern California. So my kids had never seen the area. My husband had kind of knew the area from growing up, but I packed up everybody, and we moved out here. And I started working with kids. Did I know much about autism? Nah. Did I know a lot about ADHD? Yes, only because my daughter has it. Did I know a lot about dyslexia? A little, because my husband has one form of it. Okay. But that's about all I had what they saw in me, though, was this deep and abiding passion to work with people and then take this doctoral learning to um, just really make their program much better and make the learning environment the best I can, honestly. And so since then, so I've got this book going. Other opportunities that came up was they gave me a chance to do a little bit of work with autism research, and in so doing, I've gotten to work with people like Temple Grandin, who is a very interesting person when you meet her. She's not the warm and fuzzy type at all, but she's extraordinarily knowledgeable, and she will tell you exactly what's on her mind. I've gotten to work with John Elder Robinson, who's also um, quite a large figure within the autism world, and just some really remarkable people that I have the privilege to have taught. That these kids have seen, you can't even imagine the challenges that some of them have gone through. Um, if I were to say that these kids have heard all of their life that they have been told that they are stupid or lazy or that no one will ever be able to work with them, um, that's the student I have, and I work mostly on the undergraduate level. We're starting to develop a little bit of a master's presence, but I like to focus my energies. My favorite classes are the ones where it's the kids that are the very, very first time ever, and they're terrified, and they've been told for so long that they can't do anything and they're never going to have a job besides something innocuous. So, um, but some other opportunities that I've had, I have taken what I've been learning and working with these kids, and I've developed two very specific strands that I've been speaking a lot at conferences on regional, local, national, international levels. Um, and this having this, as I put it, the D on the end of my name, which is the doctor, is the only way that you're going to get into doing any of this. And it's terrifying at first. It was terrifying the first time I got up to speak. Um, but it's the two specific strands I've been working with have been using learning games, and this is where it's a little different from what a lot of other people are doing. There's been a lot of research about the use of computer games. Uh, God, there's a lot of research about that. I teach primarily business and accounting, and there's a lot of stuff out there for accounting and using computer games. I did a lot of presentations about what's available on the iOS platform, and there's a bunch. Um, but what I focused on was the non-computer games because I'm just that way. I'm not going to go with what everybody thinks should be done. It's just not my style. And I've had to over the years in teaching to these kids who learn differently. They don't learn by somebody talking and writing on a board. They just don't. um, or some do, but that's not the best way. Is bringing in what's called universal design. That for those of you, if you're in education, it's Wiggins and McTighe, and they bringing in multimodal learning where I do a lot of games that involve movement. I mean, literally physically standing up. Um, we've done tug of war to teach balance. I've done. God, I remember. I think the most basic game was I took a piece of masking tape and just put it on the floor, and then had the students kind of walk the line and try to hold their balance just to teach them about the idea of balance in accounting. Seems a little far-fetched, but it worked. Um, what else have we done? I have them all written down in different places, but all kinds of things. Oh, using a basketball hoop, which they all get a thrill when I pull out the basketball hoop because they know that I stink at basketball. So If I'm going to make them do it, I'm going to do it too. But it's to teach things like supply chains, or to teach ratio of shots taken to shots made, and then applying that to accounting. And it's just all these little tricks, because I also have a firm belief that if students are happy, then they're engaged and they learn. And so this is where that's one strand. I've had a couple places ask me to write papers, and then there's that silly thing of there's only 24 hours a day, and I'm only one body, so I'm trying to get them done among all my other copious spare time. And then the other strand, I've presented about. In fact, I was just at the American Accounting Association about a week ago, talking to them about this. Is taking your lesson plan, and most, I guess it's considered good quote teaching to have a lesson plan in place. I mean, I'm going to guess that nobody ever taught me that explicitly, but I figured it out along the way. Um, but doing a technique that is called MicroUnity, and that one is where you take your lesson plan and I break it into chunks of as few as 5 minutes, and then depending on how long my class is, sometimes up to 55, 65 minutes, depending on what the activity is, or if we're doing a pretty chunky exercise of some sort. And what this does is it allows me to kind of mix and match, if this makes sense, where I'm not just lecturing. It keeps me hyper focused, because it's okay. I have to talk about uh, whatever topic, and I've got 10 minutes to get my idea across. And then we're going to switch to an activity where they reinforce what they just learned. And then we might do a little bit more lecture, or I might bring in a video that would extend the concept to the next lecture piece. And it just keeps it where the students don't have a chance to get bored. But there's tricks to this where I put the agenda down to the timing on the board, so that my students who need the structure, which is common for people with autism spectrum, they want to see the structure, and then they'll call me on it if I'm running really late, if we get onto either a tangent or some really thorny discussion somewhere. But they like it because it keeps them engaged without feeling like they're spending a lot of brain energy on learning, which they get out of there and they say, what did we just learn? Because, of course, good teaching, you wrap it up, you tell them what you're going to tell them, you teach them whatever the topic is, and then you tell them what they learned. And then I'll come back and say, okay, now, this is what we did. And they go, oh my gosh, we didn't even realize that was so much fun. It's like, well, and this goes back to my theory of we're going to have fun, we're going to learn a little bit, and then the next class we move it forward just a little bit further. But that's where I've been asked to speak internationally and write another set of paper. And by the way, my textbook that is still in print, it takes us, let's see, during a year cycle, because it updates annually. We have 7 months to do the update and all the validating and peer review and everything. And then once we finish that, we get 5 months to breathe and plan for the next edition. So it's kind of crazy. And this is where I talked about being a doctor is almost more challenging than getting it, because now people know you're a doctor, and they figured that you had to do some pretty serious work and be somewhat smart at some level to have gotten that doctorate. And then they start asking for things like, hey, can you take a look at my curriculum and tell me if this is going to work? Since my doctorate with the EDD is curriculum and instruction. So I've had to review curriculum for, I'm trying to think, at least 3 dozen institutions around the world to tell them, was their curriculum up to snuff to meet a certain standard? Which has been really terrific, because it's helped me stay current with what's happening in my particular fields. But at the same time, I feel like saying, hey, I got other things to do. You don't get that option anymore as a doctor. I guess you could. I guess I could say, no, I don't want to do that, but that's not my style. So, what else have I gotten to do? I have been tasked with, oh God, I sit on my library task force and I review dozens of books and periodicals and other types of resources on a continual basis to tell people, will this be good for an addition to our library? Why will this work? Why should we invest this money? Right now, I am uh, on a committee where we are putting together a unique bachelor's program because, of course, working with diverse learners, putting up a standard business degree or a standard, it's kind of a cross discipline one, standard communications degree. This is not going to work with our dynamic at all. And so we're crafting, from what I can tell, this is part of what they expect me to do, and they taught me really well, actually, at Phoenix, how to go and evaluate all kinds of other schools and see what they're doing and how does it compare to what we're doing so that we're promoting something that is worthwhile and that students will enjoy. So it's going to be a degree in communications and entrepreneurial leadership. And we're right now just about at the point where we're going to get it accredited. And then just had a silly thought as I was, about a week or two ago, and I went over to my department chair and I said, "Have we ever thought about getting accredited as a business school?" We have national accreditation, we've got all that, but we don't have the specific uh, AACSB or ACBSP accreditation that designates us as an accredited business school, not just the other accreditations. And so once we finish this degree, that's already my next project. And it's another thing, though, because since I have the doctor on the back of my name, um, people take it seriously. But the other edge of that is I have to be really careful and really research and really do the groundwork to find out what is the best course of action and why, and go talk to the people because they give you a lot of esteem once you have this designation. And also, to all the years of experience since I came out of industry. I wasn't always a teacher. And so I can go in and say, yes, this works, and this is where it was used at this company that I've worked at, or this one that I have colleagues at, or whatever. What else have I done with my doctorate? Well, I have written a ton of curriculum. I did some freelance work when I was in the in between time of I've been fired from a job and I'm starting at this school in Vermont where I did a lot of writing when they did Common Core and that was still in vogue. I honestly don't know who the end customer was, but I did a lot of writing for them, and it was a lot of fun. I now reserve my writing for things that have my name on it instead of some other company. I've sat on a program advisory board for a couple different colleges where they have asked me, since I now have a lot of colleagues in the greater accounting and business disciplines, that I've met at different conferences and have seen me speak and I've seen them speak, and they say, hey, can you sit on this board and give us some feedback as to how well this will prepare students for careers, since that's another one of my passions is making sure students, especially the ones that I work with who are so vulnerable, make sure that they really are ready when it comes time for them to go into the workforce. And that's it's a program I'm right now. We're putting into its second year at our school. That they asked me specifically to do this. that teaches students the little tiny things, not about the discipline or anything like that, but what does it mean to work in an office? Um, and it gets pretty nitty gritty. We get down to the little things of uh, personal hygiene, just to put it as gently as I can, and dealing with people who have different standards about that than you do, handling negative emotions at work, because that sometimes can happen. Um, we've all probably experienced it at some point. All these little things that these students who have been getting through school and just trying to get to the next level and pass the grade or whatever they're trying to do, and then they're not thinking about, well, when I get in the workforce, oh, that's a different place. Yes, it is, and we all know that. And it's a lot of fun. It's working with this particular group, and now, I mean, I look at my life, and every single aspect of my life, every single part, has something to do with my doctorate. I now live in the most beautiful place I've ever lived in the world, because I have a doctorate. I get at my I serve on my church's leadership board because I have a doctorate. And it's a lot of those little things that it's just getting the doctorate was hard. It was a lot of late nights and a lot of early mornings and a lot of lost weekends. But it's turned out to be one of the most rewarding things I've ever done in my life because of just the benefit of I get to choose where I want to live. I get to choose if my classes are certain times during the day, and if I don't feel like going into work because I don't have a meeting and I don't have students scheduled, you know what? I don't go in. However, I'll pay for that later. I usually have enough. um, and the biggest thing I would want to impart to any of you is it's hard, and I'm not going to tell you it's not. It's worth it. Just stick with it. Don't ever give up. And if you need to quit, which God knows I did enough times during my doctorate, especially during that statistics class that almost kicked my butt. There was a lot of nights when I would say, okay, I quit. My husband would say, okay, you can quit till the morning. And that's it. And it kept me going. So I think it's if we're ready, can we open up the floor to questions?
Well, first of all, Dr. Landin, this is Sandy Nunn again. Thank you for that really, really interesting presentation. You hit on some great topics here, and I was really fascinated by all the things you were saying. I was curious, when you said about having worked with or met Dr. Temple Grandin.
Yep.
I found that really fascinating because I remember seeing the movie about her about a year or so ago. And so I'd love to hear a little bit more about your work with her.
Well, we were. I'm right now trying to remember exactly why she was at our school, but she's from the area. She's from New England, and she came to talk to our students about the realities of being autistic in today's world. And I was fortunate enough to sit next to her at lunch, and I remember being so nervous. I had a hard time. I mean, nobody intimidates me anymore, but she did.
Wow.
Just because she is so intense and so smart. And I had seen the movie too, so I had read some of her books. Just how her mind works. My mind doesn't even go that direction because she thinks in pictures, and I kind of get that, but I'm not a pictorial thinker at all. I think more linearly than that. And just listening to her talk about just some of her experiences and some of the things that she talked about that were in the movie and it was really, really fascinating because she is very much a no nonsense What you see is what you get type person.
Yeah, no, it's true. I mean, I remember when I watched the movie, I was fascinated by her skills, and it was exciting to me to see somebody with her particular situation to be able to achieve a doctorate was pretty amazing.
Oh yeah.
So it just goes to show you, hey, if you put your mind to it, you can achieve anything.
Oh sure.
So that's cool. Well, what I'd like to do is open this up for questions. So anybody listening to Dr. Landin's presentation, if you'd like to just step in and ask a question.
This is Medgar. Um, there's a part of this presentation that I really want to put on a loop for my teachers. Just to clarify, I'm an instructional coach for a school district. And when you mentioned that you learned how that lesson planning was really important, and MicroUniting and how important it is to have 10-minute chunks of instruction, 15 minutes here and there, and kind of plan out how you're going about doing your lesson.
Yeah.
I primarily support middle schools and high schools where that's also needed.
Sure.
So my question is, when you start pulling these pieces and start thinking about how you're going to teach your lesson in a way that is both micro-united and engaging for students, how do you go through that process?
Well, I kind of begin with the end in mind. What do I want to accomplish? Where was I at the previous class session? Where did we leave off? Where do I want to get to? And then what are the most important pieces that we have got to hit during this particular session? And so then I take a look at, different materials. What have we got? And then say, okay, so for instance, I've got to do a lecture tomorrow, which is on human resources and laws, which is not the most exciting, riveting lecture I can ever deliver. But okay, if I have to break this down, I'm going to probably talk for a few minutes, 5-10 minutes about why do we have laws, and then I engage students by I bring them in to say, what do they know? A lot of times, I don't know if you've ever heard of this. It's a plug-in for PowerPoint called Poll Everywhere or Polev.
Yes.
I use that a lot because by the time students are starting to get glassy-eyed, especially talking about legislation, I can pull them in and say, all right, so where have you seen or heard of discrimination in the workplace? And that generally brings them right back in because everybody has seen or heard of it at some point in time. And then we extend that thought to why is it important to promote civil rights in the workplace? And then maybe I'll probably pull in a TED Talk or something to help talk about some of the up and coming issues in HR legislation. And then we'll talk about, so what is their work world going to look like? What are some of the trends? Because I also am having them do a project for the semester about discrimination in the workplace. What are some of the different pieces that are kind of hot point issues right now so that we can look and see where do these laws intersect, and we take it in contexts that are important to the students, which for some of them, I mean, they're afraid to say, well, what do I do? Do I tell them that I'm autistic when I interview? And my answer is always yes. Tell them, because that way, if you're not looking them in the eye, then they understand if they know anything about autism. And if they don't, then shame on them. They should do their research. But, it's just bringing in different things. I've been kind of toying in the back of my mind of, do I want to put together some sort of a beanbag activity? Because I years ago made a whole bunch of beanbags up where I might have, kind of the, okay, which law does this belong to? And, have them where they can, or else maybe just have them toss the beanbag around the room to pick their friends so that they can, it's not me picking on someone to talk next. It's kind of selected by the students, which is really great because everybody has to stay awake at that point. Otherwise, you don't know when this is coming. But we just pick. I try to do different things, especially when it's a really dry topic, just to keep them engaged, and also that way, if they say, "Yeah, wait a minute, what's going on with the whole same-sex marriage or legalization of marijuana or whatever, and how does that intersect HR law?" Well, then we can either talk about it more, and sometimes I'll just say, I don't know. Let's open it up and look at the Google machine and find out what it knows. And we'll do a little on-the-spot research. It keeps them super engaged, and I also have a way, in case it does seem like somebody's talking the whole time and kind of dominating the conversation. And of course, you got the ones who are trying to say, "Oh, don't look at me." I call it the Wheel of Doom. It's it's a little spinning wheel, but it's put up by Capsules.net. And it's a random name picker where you can put all your students' names on it, and as they speak, you remove it from the wheel. And so that way they don't know who's going to get chosen next. And I also give them the out, though, if they say, "I just don't know." Okay, let's go to the next person, or I say, let's, help them out. Who knows this one? But that way it kind of keeps the conversation going without me singling out anybody unnecessarily or having somebody dominate a topic or go completely unnoticed for an entire class session. My classes tend to be smaller than about 25, so this is a very manageable piece.
Okay.
Does that help?
It definitely sounds like there's a lot of intellectual preparation that goes into before you even start looking at what the lesson is going to look like. There's some preparation for what is going to be needed.
Oh, yeah. And I do that at the beginning of the semester, actually before we even roll. I have the entire semester mapped out down to assignments, quizzes, everything, and then I kind of organically let it flow as far as specific tools, because in the whole business and accounting field, there's always something new or a new thought that's going to come up or some hot button issue that's going to come up. And so I kind of leave it flexible until usually the Sunday before, but sometimes the hour before, depending on how controversial the topic is. And I try to bring in the most relevant that I can possibly bring in for these students. That way they can go home and say, "Hey, we talked about pot in class today." Yes. Yeah, I tell them, I say, "Go take it back to your parents. Tell them we talked about pot in accounting," because that actually is a big, big deal.
Yeah, I would imagine it would be.
It's an up and coming industry, and there's a lot behind it. It's unbanked because of federal law, and so there's a whole nother industry springing up because of that, and it's just going from there.
Wow. I think the other thing that caught my interest was the job search, the postdoctorate job search.
Oh my
I
gosh!
think there's going to be a lot of people who are working on their degrees who that's going to be their reality. I'd love to hear a little more about that.
Well, I sat and I counted up because for whatever reason, I had saved every single application I put out to my Google Drive. I guess I did it because just in case somebody called back, I'll know what I said on the application. Mostly cover letters, but sometimes it was a physical application. Mm-hmm. And I actually applied to 750-ish colleges, different positions.
Wow.
Yeah, in about a 2-year span. Literally the interview I did for the job I'm in now was number 13 on ground interview. And my husband and I laughed about it because it was in 2013, so we got a black cat. But it was, we really did.
For once, huh?
Yeah. But no, it spanned 2+ years. And it's just because I didn't have a I have a very specialized skill set, and it took me a long time to really find just the right fit. And there's always you get turned down, but you don't know why. I mean, I came in second place. I don't know how many times,
Hmm.
and you can't ask why. You just have to accept this. Sometimes they say, "Oh, it's University of Phoenix." Well, it's not as good as fill in the blank. And I didn't want to quite argue with them during the interview and say, it's actually harder. And it's something I have talked about with other people since then. Just it's actually harder because with Phoenix, it's just you and the computer talking with people that you may meet or you may not. I was very fortunate to have a learning team that we would sit down at the beginning of each class. One had to fly in, but we would find a somewhat local area where we could go have a meal and parse out the class and then figure out how we were going to attack all the assignments. But uh, that was the job search was really, really tricky. There was a lot of times I wanted to just give up, but that wasn't an option because I still had people to support and feed and student loans to repay. And something you might also tell your students, it's something I didn't find out about since I went into teaching for a nonprofit, and this has been in the news a little lately, is public service loan forgiveness,
Hmm.
which is a program. My advice with it is if they do pursue that, talk with them, make sure that you are staying on top of it. Every year I recertify, I make sure it's on track, I make sure that where I am in the process, and I'm hoping that the powers that be don't cancel that before my end of my 10th year, that I can reap the benefits of that, because working for a nonprofit, you just you sacrifice in wages, but the benefits are way beyond what the wages are.
Hmm. Yeah, that's interesting. I'm maybe picking your brain about that a little more later.
Okay.
Okay. Let's see. Is there anyone else who would like to ask Dr. Landin any questions? Cheryl?
Yeah, I'd like to. Hi, Jeanette. Thanks for
Hello.
being here. Thank you for talking about all the wonderful memories of our learning team.
Oh yeah.
Really appreciate that. And I actually share that information with the group that I'm in the Bay Area. We have what's called the SAS Networking group, and it's for doctoral students, and they come from as far away as Bakersfield and Roseville and Shasta to come down
Wow.
and work with us once a month to do SAS workshops. So we've developed something locally to support individuals, which we haven't had in the past. But one of the things I did want to ask you about, and you touched on it briefly, was perseverance. The importance of perseverance and grit. And then how do you translate your perseverance and grit to your students?
That's a great question. I gotta think about how for them, I guess it is. I'm very real with my students. I mean, as far as we're all human beings, and we talk about this periodically of how how are they going to survive, or how are they going to get through this, or oh, I don't know if I can make it through this class. And quite often I will either meet with them, one to one in my office, or we'll go grab a bite to eat or something, and we'll talk about what are they afraid of. What's the worst that can happen if they quit? Well, I have to go back and live in mom's basement, and I'll feel like a failure, and so. Okay, and we'll talk about what does it take to find that perseverance when you just want to quit, and what's the consequence, and and I'm not afraid to share with them especially when we talk about, job search or whatever, the feeling of, I just want to give up. Or, there's days when we have a 15-week semester. When we hit week 12, and we're all, myself included, we're all mentally wiped out by this point. And, how do you dig deep and find that just enough to get through 3 more weeks? And so we talk about, okay, what are you going to, how are you going to get through the next week? Okay, well, that's too big to think about. And we bring it down to, can you get through the next hour? Can you get through tonight's homework? And no, okay, so what can we do to help you get there? And sometimes it's just, I need to sit down and just unknot whatever situation that's getting in the way. It could be that they've got 4 papers due, and they don't want to tell me that mine is the least of the 4 papers, because that would be rude. But it's like, hey, I get it. Other ones might be more important to you in your perception. But we sit down and really say, okay, this is what let's make out a schedule. Let's find a way to attack this that will help you feel strong, that will help you feel like you got this. And what can you do to reward yourself? If it's just, go down to the game room and play a game of air hockey with your friends once you've finished doing what you have to do for the evening. And then tomorrow's another day, and just taking it one day at a time, but setting those little goals and little rewards. I mean, Cheryl, during our doctorate, I had it where at the end of each class, if I got an A, I got a mani-pedi. That was just the rule. So, but it was, little tiny rewards like that, and even now, just little things. And my daughter is slipping me a note. Oh, telling me that I've been talking for 50 minutes of just, it translates so much to every aspect of your life, of those days when, you've worked really hard and you're mentally tired from, after you get your doctorate, having to write a grant or solve a problem that you need more help somewhere. And where do you, find that? Well, I don't have an answer for everybody. I know for me, I exercise. I allow myself to. This is one exception. I came home with my computer charger, only because my computer was mostly dead when I left school today. But I allow myself to quit for the evening and not do work just for a couple hours and rebond with my family, just for a little bit, so that tomorrow I'm not feeling quite so tired and ready to give up in the middle of the day. As far as your group, which I love that people are coming in from Shasta and Bakersfield, that's a long drive and that's a lot of commitment. Just that they are persevering enough to do that. Celebrate that. That's a lot. That says a lot about their character, that they're willing to come in and be with people who motivate them. Um, Celebrate that fact. Uh, Someday they'll look back and they might not remember much about their classes, but they'll remember those meetings and whatever fun they had during those times.
Yeah, I would agree with you from that standpoint, Jeanette. I speak very fondly of individuals that I've discussed our team and how our team had formed at that very first workshop with Dr. Debbie Ritter.
Actually, that was
someone
her name,
I'm working with. Yeah, Dr. Debbie Ritter and Tony Corstens. And they're still involved. Yeah, they're still involved in the process. I'm actually doing a research project in Dr. Debbie's group. But the most important thing is that that individuals that are working on their doctorate and then afterwards is that you're not alone. And I think a
No.
lot of times people feel that they're learning in isolation,
Yeah.
and they forget that they can collaborate. And I don't know if you remember Chris, but remember Chris from Texas who worked for the Department of Corrections?
Yes, yes, yes.
Yeah, she would also, she would always be there in our groups. And even though we never physically met her, she was part of our cohort
Sure.
when she was in different teams. And I think that's one of the things that individuals should remember is that as we're working collaboratively towards an end goal, it's important to have individuals to support you. And I also like the fact that what you had just mentioned now about the work-life balance.
Oh, yeah.
And that's something I'm working with a lot of administrators, high school administrators, as a mentor. And that's the first question I always ask them: how is your work-life balance today?
Yeah.
And if they don't have an answer for that, I say, we need to work on that. Because,
something I do that my students, when they come in, I have a bell, a Tibetan bell that goes off every roughly half hour. I don't have it timed, but if they're in my office and it goes off, it's like, okay, we're going to stop and let's take a deep breath. And that's to remind me on an ongoing process during the day, because it's really easy. And you probably know this, Cheryl, just when you get really working on something and you just lose track of time. And all this bell going off at about a half hour increment will remind me, hey, breathe, get a drink of water, maybe move around, go see the sunlight, do something like that.
Yeah, and I think that's a very important fact that you brought up. I also wanted to ask about your perseverance in publishing your book, because many individuals, once they finish their doctoral work, they want to be able to use that knowledge somehow, writing articles, doing research, publishing. So I remember the beginning of your journey of working on your book, but can you share about the perseverance as far as getting that accomplished?
That took a lot to get launched. There was a lot of having to dig deep, especially through feedback from reviewers, because we would get some not so nice feedback. But it was also a huge collaborative project. I'm still blown away by how many people are involved in producing this book, because while Paulette and I are the only two names that they see on it, there are at least 3 or 4 dozen people behind the scenes that are doing copy editing, compiling, I forget what it's called, when you're setting the page up, I can't pull the name out of my head, doing the artwork for the covers, doing all the checks to make sure that our images are cited correctly, that our information is presented correctly, that we're accurate. It is the physical update for each edition probably takes Paulette and I, we're only given about 2.5 months to update I don't have a copy with me because I'm in my husband's office. I think it's about a 400-page textbook. So we have about 2 months to update it for current laws, for whatever developments are happening. And then the other 5 months are getting it typeset and everything else, and working with a group in India and a group in Denmark to make sure that the page layout is correct, that all of our online pieces, because we have what's called a smart book integration, that it reads the book to you, and we have to give it prompts and questions. And one thing Paulette and I have done is we have retained every spec of the intellectual process. We do not farm out our test bank, our PowerPoints, anything. Last year, our publisher, he did it for time's sake because we were struggling with something, but he had sent out one piece of the book, and then this year, as I was updating it, I could see what the other writer had done, and it was not in our voice. It was incorrect in some places. And I didn't want to quite talk to my editor and say, now listen, this is why I said don't do that. But we do meet with our editor once a year in May at a conference that goes around the country, and McGraw-Hill has asked us, and so has my school, and Paulette now teaches for a university in Alaska, that we speak at this conference. So we get to not only work really hard to get this book ready so that we are all done with initial edits by the time we get to this meeting, and then we also get to, sit down with the editing staff and, kind of scheme out where we need to go and plan out the different marketing campaigns with them, and if they need us to go and speak on webinars or whatever elsewhere. It's really a lot more than I would have ever dreamed writing a book would be. And here I'm sitting here. Yeah, I just had an offer to write another accounting book with a gentleman in Maine, so I'm debating it really strongly.
But it's it keeps you busy. That's one thing. But it sounds like a neat process, though. I mean, you've been able to keep this relationship that you established a number of years ago with Paulette still going, and you're also being able to stay current within your field so that you can share that knowledge with your students. So that hard work is paying off in multiple ways.
Yes, I mean, and Paulette, for all that it was a chance meeting, I mean, she and I have, we're pretty much each other's best friends now, just because we have to work so closely. I don't think hardly a week goes by where we're not emailing or texting about something or another. And it's just because we have to stay that close. But the nice part is being in a formal textbook, the whole issue of who's getting paid for what work that's off our shoulders, because McGraw-Hill has the contract, and we're free to do what we need to do and not worry about that part.
Well, that's good. So congratulations again on that. I remember it was a long fought out battle, but you persevered.
Yeah, we did. We thought we were, I don't know if you remember this part, we thought we were not going to actually get it published because the first publishing company dropped the book. Yeah. And I just happened to get in touch with McGraw-Hill, and they took the chance because they didn't have anything in this space. And I'll never forget the first edition published, I guess it was October of 2014. Yeah, and we went to the first time we went to this conference in May of 2014. They had a 4x5 foot cover of our book, and we just Paulette and I just stood there in the exhibitor hall. We went there after hours and just stood there and looked at it and went, "Oh my God, that's us." It was just really bizarre going, okay, but we're just us. Yeah, we do everything just like everybody else does.
Yeah,
but
well, that's great.
It's fun.
That's great.
Yeah, those are great stories, Dr. Landin. I appreciate, as somebody who publishes quite a bit myself, whether it's articles, and I've published 3 book chapters with Springer.
Yeah.
And Rutledge and different things. So I understand. I mean, it's very exciting when you really see your work in front like that. So congratulations on all that. But I hate to cut this short, guys, but it looks like we're down to the wire in terms of our time. We may actually invite Dr. Landin back again at some point, because she has so many fascinating stories. So we really appreciate all the things you've shared with us today, and could probably listen to you much longer because you've been a great speaker.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, I really have enjoyed listening to you today, and it's like you had some great personal stories to share and also personal experiences. I enjoyed listening to what you were saying, how you got fired and then you ended up in Vermont. I mean, it's funny how things can, unexpected experiences can take you in a whole different direction. So,
and here we now own property, and it's like, yeah, they're gonna have to use a crowbar to get me out of this area. So.
Yeah, Well, I understand. But that's great. I mean, and it's great that you're showing how even something that most people would consider very negative or downer, you've turned that into a positive. And I think that's great to hear for everyone in general who's working toward a doctorate, because like you've shared, I mean, and like Cheryl has shared at Medgar, I mean, it's not easy going through this process, but as long as everyone, just kind of develops that perseverance and that circle of influence, with that support system, I mean, anyone who's working toward a doctorate can achieve great things if they just simply put their mind to it and don't give up.
Don't give up.
That's right. So, but, well, anyways, I see it's 5:05, and again, I want to sincerely thank you, Dr. Landin, for sharing your experiences and your story, and for all the great questions we've had today. And so maybe in the future, if you'd be so inclined, we would love to have you back.
I appreciate it. Yeah, I'd love to.
Okay. I think actually it would be interesting to hear more about your publishing experience, because I think that would be interesting to people listening to the webinar, and we could kind of develop maybe a presentation, about your book publishing experience and what that's like. I think people would find that very interesting.
Sure.
So, but anyways, if there's no more questions, I'm going to go ahead and close this webinar. And again, thank you, Dr. Landin, for speaking to us today, and we sincerely appreciate your time with us.
Thank you very much. It was great being here.
All right. Thank you,
Great
Jeanette.
to see you.
All right.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
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 Bye.